We always start out by thanking Ava so much for giving us this platform. And every time that we're on, she's on, which means she has to give up her evening. And I really appreciate that, Ava, and I thank you very much for it. So I'm also see a few people in here that I know, Angel, and obviously HypnoFun. And then Janie Indigo is on here, who's helping us get our books published. And Jen is monitoring over here, but she's working on another project this evening, so she won't be joining on screen. And Master Griller, very welcome to you, and Super Jen and Nenny. So we get started, and when we first start out, and I also want to thank everybody for remaining muted. That certainly helps quite a bit. When we start out, we always begin by asking if anyone has a question that is urgent or something that's pressing that they want to throw out into the room for others to consider. So I'll be quiet for 30 seconds or so to hear if anybody wants to say something, and after that I'll introduce Master Shack. Hearing no urgency, I'll go ahead and introduce Master Shack. And Master Shack is a very important friend of mine. We've been exchanging emails and chatting and so forth for many years. He lives in San Antonio. And actually, when Jen and I run into relationship problems, Master Shack is our counselor for that. We've been pretty smooth for the last 8 or 9 months. And have not needed to come down to see him. However, we just saw him at the Master Slave Conference this last weekend in Sugar Bear. And by the way, Sugar Bear, his boy, is going to be on 2 weeks from now when we do a foot fetish, foot worship workshop. So we're looking forward to that. Right now, I'll introduce Master Shack. His name is Dan Shackelford, and he's the founder of the Alamo City Training Academy, and that's Alamo, San Antonio, and he serves as the chairman of their board of directors. He was born in Chicago. He's been actively involved in the leather community for about 50 years. Master Shack is a retired federal civil servant. He's experienced in management, education, program planning, and execution, and he teaches business ethics. His educational background includes degrees from DePaul University and the University of Pennsylvania, and he's a graduate of Josephson Institute of Ethics, and he's also the Hypnosis Motivation Institute. He spent 10 years in the Army medical service as a medical service officer, 6 years as a member of an interdenominational religious community. He's also studied shamanism, comparative theology, community building, computer science, graphic designs, and operations research, ops research. Very well-rounded, sophisticated guy. His favorite kinks include, in alphabetical order, bondage, electroplay, erotic hypnosis, flogging, mindfuck, sensation play. He's experienced in teaching all of these areas, as well as ethics in BDSM. So scene building, protocol development, dungeon safety, and of course, BDSM 101. So I'm going to turn the video over to Master Shack right now and give him the floor. So give me just a minute to do that logistically, and away you go. There you are, Master Shack.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bob. I do appreciate it. I've got quite an esoteric background, as Dr. Bob indicated. In addition to studying shamanism, I did a couple of years of studying on energy healing, general energy work, energy exchange. I also studied martial arts for many years while I was in high school and college, and learned a lot about energy flows and the use of energy for defense as well as for play. So it's been a lot of fun. And what I want to talk to you about today, we'll talk primarily about energy exchanges and how to go about using energy in play and in BDSM. And then we'll get a little bit into spirituality and how that plays into spirituality. I'll try to keep this quick and relatively basic so that we can get through it and leave time for any questions you might have towards the end. When discussing energy, I'm using that term primarily to refer to a universal energy that is within all of us, that is in our bodies, in our minds, in the environment around us. In Chinese philosophy and culture, it's usually referred to as qi. In Japan, they call it ki. In India, prana. In Hawaii, huna. There are all kinds of other names for it. But that's what we're going to be talking about. So when you hear me refer to the term energy, I'm referring primarily to this universal energy, unless I specify something else along the way. I'll also refer to it often as chi, because that's part of my background with dealing with it. A question: have you ever walked into a dungeon? That little bit of black along the top of the screen, by the way, was the cat's tail. She's up on the desk. Have you ever walked into a dungeon or play space and commented about the energy in the room? I'm sure most of you probably have. And that is actually a manifestation of chi, of the universal energy being exchanged and amplified due to what's going on. We're wonderfully complex creatures. We're constantly generating and using energy. Our bodies run basically on an electrical system that produces electromagnetic energy. And that energy is part of, or at least interacts with, the universal chi. It enables us also to use that type of energy, which we'll get into in a moment. Whenever we come into contact with each other, there is an exchange of energy that happens between us. It's on an extremely subtle plane, but a lot of people are sensitive to it. On an even more subtle plane, our thoughts generate energy, which can connect to the chi and actually link us to another person, another being, another plane. Energy literally goes wherever the mind goes. And that's part of what we do with martial arts, and that's a major part of what we do when we're playing with energy. By guiding the energy with intention, with breath, gaze, with gestures, even with touch, we can achieve some really deep effects. One of the things that this will do is bring us into emotional and harmonic resonance with our partner. It'll bring us very close in energy to their energy body, what some people call the astral body, and to parts of their personality. It's important to be aware of this because sometimes the effects are unexpected. You can connect so deeply with someone on an energy level that you can stimulate emotions that they've had buried for years or decades even. Uh, it's important to be able to recognize when that happens and to be able to deal with it. Because those emotional releases can happen just about any time. It's not always possible for a submissive to use a safe word if you trigger an emotional release. They may not know it's coming. It's just one of those things that's going to happen to them. And you have to be able, as the dominant, or as a submissive in the area, or as someone watching the scene, be aware of what's happening, and if necessary, be able to lend assistance with that emotional release. If the dominant doesn't know how to do it, somebody in the area familiar with energy work may have to take over. You have to be willing and able to look deeply into that person's psyche and emotional state and do the best for them that you can. Now, when we receive intense stimulation, like we do in BDSM, or experience really strong emotions, we produce a lot of additional energy. That is one of the factors that causes that feeling of energy in the dungeon. There is so much of an exchange going on, and each of the play partners is generating so much energy that you get a group full of people doing this, and you've got it floating all over the place. It's going to be interesting. Now, when it does that, understand everybody in the area is influenced by that energy. If it's a strong emotional energy, you might find other people being impacted emotionally by what's going on. The real fun thing is that the mind can learn to control energy, at least to some extent. In the martial arts, we use this concept all the time. I studied Aikido, and it was all about redirecting energy. It was all about managing not only your own energy, but your opponent's energy. I also studied shamanism, which involves energy flows and the use of energy, and studied energy and spiritual healing. In Wicca, in a lot of the similar esoteric parts, you'll find that energy work is one of the common factors. So it's fun. We've got to learn to use that like they do. And we can get some interesting things out of it. It's not difficult to learn how to manage energy, but it does require a lot of practice. The key to learning to use it is to use your imagination. When I'm thinking about managing energy or doing energy play, one of the first things I do is go through a very brief meditation to center, to bring all of my energies in from where they've been scattered during the day, and then visualize that energy in my body, and I actually start feeling the energizing effect of that. Often it manifests, at least in my imagination, as a glow around my body. And if you use that visual image, it's really useful for you to learn how to manage that, how to use it effectively in BDSM. Now, there's some simple exercises that you can do. When I first learned about energy exchange, it was by simply sitting opposite my partner, both of us with our shirts off, and just running my hands about a half inch to a quarter of an inch above the partner's skin and feeling. See what sensations I feel. You'd be surprised. You can start feeling resistance. You can start feeling pushing away, if you will, if they're trying to resist you. You can feel different parts of the body having more resistance than others. You can sometimes feel heat radiating more than you would expect from that body part. That's usually due to energy. That simple thing shows you that you can learn how to sense it. But there are other things you can do with it. I'm one of those people who doesn't play with a single tail very often. So, because I don't practice a lot, when I do use one, my aim is usually not the best. I might hit where I want to hit maybe once out of every 4 times. But if I start using energy, I can visualize energy flowing out of my arm, through my hand, down the width, and actually feel that width becoming part of my body. When I do that, I can hit the target about 95% of the time. The other 5%, I'm very close. It's almost like I'm just pointing my finger at that part and the end of the whip goes there. That's one of the interesting things that we can do with it. You can do that with flogging. You can do that with almost anything. That's simply extending your energy, your chi, using that to direct where the toy is going. You can use energy also playing with the body, and it can numb pain. It can also create pain. I can do this with hypnosis, which I like doing, but it's also possible with energy work without any real suggestion being used at all, other than just telling the person what it is you're doing. You can tell them that you are introducing an energy field that's going to be very, very painful. And as long as they share your concept of energy flow, astral bodies, they're going to feel it. There's no question about that. They're going to feel it. You can redirect pain. You can redirect body feelings. You do all kinds of things like that with energy play. A fun thing to do with energy play is bondage. If you've got somebody and you want to glue them in place against the wall, you can simply tell them that you're applying a very sticky energy to their back, to their arms, to their hands. Once you feel it, and I guarantee if you're used to working with energy, you'll actually feel where your hand is going over their body, maybe not even in physical contact with the body. You'll feel a stickiness developing. When you're satisfied it's sticky enough, you just press them against the wall and tell them they're stuck. Now, if you've got a really submissive person whose desire is to please, they're probably not going to test it. They're just going to stay stuck. But almost every submissive I know, somewhere in the deep part of their mind, they're going to try to test it. And very few of them will be able to get loose. It'll take somebody who probably did not agree with your concept of energy at the beginning for them to break loose. It's really fun. You can do a lot of odd things with energy that way. I want to make sure that if you're using energy play in a scene, especially if you're using it during whipping or flogging or inflicting pain, remember that you're probably going to need to do some energy healing during aftercare. Your toys caused some physical damage to the body. Not severe, but there was some damage because you probably raised welts, caused redness, did any of the other things we find so much fun to do. The energy that you associated with those toys when you were using them has done more damage to the energy body or the astral body of that person. That needs to be healed too. You need to be aware that that heals much slower. If they share your understanding of energy play and they agree to the energy play, it's also going to have an impact on their physical recovery because they've tied the energy and the physical so closely together. That's one thing. If you're going to learn to play energy, you also need to worry about healing with energy. I've mentioned informing them. Energy play, like any other BDSM play, must be consensual. It must be informed consent. For informed consent in energy play, you're going to need your partner to have probably the same, if not a very similar understanding of how energy, how chi works, and what its effects can be during a BDSM session. If you're a dominant who loves energy play and your submissive says, I don't believe in that, I would say don't waste your time trying to use energy play. If they don't share your views on it, they're going to be resistant to it. They still have energy, they still have that, but they have shields up that will prevent it from being very effective. Basically, just don't do it unless you know that they have the same understanding. That does not mean you tell the submissive, yes, I'm going to use energy play and this is going to be the effect. And of course, they're so subservient, they say yes, or go ahead and do whatever you want. That's not negotiating. Be sure they understand that what it is and what the impact is. And you don't have time to go ahead and keep explaining how it's going to work and what's going to go on. When you're playing with energy and exchanging it with the person you're playing with and with all the people around you, you want to be in a good mood. There is positive energy, there is negative energy. If you're in a good mood, you're going to have a lot of positive energy, and that's what you want. When you have the positive energy and you start going through a BDSM session, you're increasing the positive energy considerably, and everybody benefits from it. If you go in a bad mood, you had a bad day, you're angry at someone or angry at the world, you go into the session, let's say the submissive is in a really bad mood. They're going to come out of it in a positive mood most of the time. Why? Because they've sucked the dominant dry. People in a bad mood filled with negative energy will draw positive energy from anywhere in the environment they can. and they've already got an energy exchange established between themselves and the dom they're working with. So that's their primary source. They're going to be sucking energy out of that dominant. If you have that happening, you're going to find that the dominant feels drained quickly. They feel exhausted, that the scene is cut short as it goes. If the dominant is going into it with a bad mood, yeah, they're going to come out probably feeling a lot better. As they say, they've gotten rid of their anger. They've gotten rid of the negative emotions. That's because they've dumped all of those negative emotions into the submissive, who's probably feeling the blows and the scene a lot more than they normally would with the intensity of the play, because that energy is adding to it in a very negative manner. Hopefully, they've got enough positive energy that they can convert that energy into a positive energy. And it is possible to convert negative to positive. Positive energy basically contributes positively to a scene. I know that sounds strange, but yeah, it does. You will feed off each other as it goes, and it will build. Something that I like doing, teaching more than actually doing, because I don't submit that often. A submissive going in a bad mood, what I suggest, and I've read a couple of other people suggesting this also, so I know it's not just me. Imagine a spear in the air above you, and put as much of the negative energy as you can into that sphere. Some people say that with each blow, they feel more negative energy moving into that sphere until all the negative is gone. Do whatever you need to do to push all of your negative energy into that sphere. And usually it'll look like it's really dark and black and all the things we imagine negativity to be. But make that sphere start to change color. Make it become more of a golden glow, showing positive energy. Do a mental picture of it actually changing color. You can do that during the scene, even as you feed negative energy into it. Just imagine it changing color and make it get to the point where it's absolutely glowing, almost like a sun. At that point, it's starting to radiate positive energy, and that can make the scene go a lot better. One of the people that I read about actually made the orb go supernova at the end of the scene, blow up. And she describes that the people around out there, and in particular Dom, who was working her, who were sensitive to energy, said that they felt a sudden rush of positive energy. So there are all kinds of tricks. That's one of them that works very well. It can be a lot of fun. I would suggest again that dominants need to learn something about energy healing if they're going to do energy play. And even if you're not into energy play, you might want to learn something about energy healing or spiritual healing, because your submissives may be in a state where their spirit is suffering. They had negative energy when it came in, and they may still have some negative energy. You may have inadvertently inadvertently hit them with energy as you were playing, it can help make the aftercare go a lot easier, a lot more thorough, and bring the two of you closer together, because as you're doing the energy healing, you are exchanging energy. You are getting closer to the core of that person. Submissives, if you're service-oriented, I suggest that you also look at energy work. It can be very useful. Let's say that your dominant comes home feeling tired, feeling exhausted, sore back, sore neck, the usual things after a long, difficult day at work. You can give them a rub down, and during that rub down, you can exchange energy. You can impart positive energy. And you'll be amazed how wonderful they'll feel when they come out of that. If you use the conscious thought of imparting positive energy, re-energizing all of those sore muscles, and re-energizing their spirit, it works very well. It's very similar to Reiki. And if you want, you can study Reiki. That is essentially energy work. You'll find, too, even if you don't have a master at the present time, that if you have the skill to make people feel better, it can be massage therapy, it can be almost anything. But if you can make people feel better, you'll make yourself a lot more valuable commodity in the BDSM community. And energy work combined with massage therapy and with all of the other work that you can do on the body can really help a lot. Understand not everybody is wired to be sensitive to energy or to be able to do energy healing. But if you are, make the most of it. If you're not, learn others. Learn more of the physical aspects, the healing, massage, the other things that you can do to make people better and feel good. But energy work is an excellent way of doing that. There's one story that I love, and I'm going to impart that to you, and it relates some to energy work. It's an ancient Chinese story attributed to Sun Tzu, who you might be familiar with from The Art of War. It's about a Taoist butcher who didn't have to have his knives sharpened for 20 years, yet they were always finely honed as they had been the day they were new. Well, the local king heard about this phenomenon and insisted that the butcher be brought before him. When he was, the king asked how he was able to accomplish such a miracle. And the butcher explained it this way. An ordinary butcher has to sharpen his knives every month because he just hacks at his meat. A good butcher has only to sharpen his knives every year because he cuts and carves his meat. But this particular butcher was on the path of Tao, the way. Wherever his knife blade went, the flesh was already parting, so his blades never wore down. Basically what this means is he had such control over the energy that just thinking of cutting the meat started cutting itself because he was managing the energy ahead of the blade. It sounds strange, but it does work. Not quite to that fineness as far as I know, but learning to manage energy is a phenomenal feeling when you do get the hang of it. When I studied martial arts, Aikido, we had what we call a touchless throw, where we could redirect an opponent in a direction where they were totally harmless to us, crashed themselves into the ground, and rendered themselves unable to do anything further. And we did it all without making physical contact. At first, I figured, hey, this is crazy. I saw it demonstrated. I figured they were just acting out a play, that it was prearranged. I studied it for a couple of years, how to direct the energy to do that. And I got to the point that I could do it fairly consistently myself. And it was amazing. With someone coming with every intention of grabbing me and beating the crap out of me, with a simple wave of my hand, I could redirect their total attention to the ground. And the next thing I knew, they were crashing face first into the ground. Now you can imagine if you were going to go beat somebody up and they just waved their hand in front of your face, you'd say, so what, and continue to beat the crap out of them. But learning to use the energy flow to connect to their energy flow and redirect that to where it can be exhausted harmlessly is an amazing feeling. That's the type of thing I'm talking about here that we can do with BDSM. We can connect to the other person's energy. We can manipulate it. We can direct it. We can extend our own energy into inanimate objects. The whip, a flogger, anything like that can become an energy weapon. And when it's that way, it is so much more effective. Energy play can be a lot of fun, but like I said, it does require practice. Not difficult to learn if you have a good imagination, but it does require practice. It requires patience. And the results you'll get are absolutely extraordinary.
Master Shack, if I could ask.
Yes.
You have mentioned that one path for learning would be to study Reiki, and I appreciate that. Are there other paths that are readily available? Because some of what you're describing has taken you years to acquire, and a lot of what you have acquired was in fact through practice. I wondered if there's a way for those of us that would like to learn energy manipulation and apply it in BDSM, that we could go to study. I'll turn that back to you.
There are classes on Reiki which are very good and don't take a lot of time. I would suggest avoiding the weekend class that certifies you as a master, as a Reiki master, but there are other classes that over time will teach you how to manage energy. If you have the inclination, a martial arts course works well. If you're not into martial arts, Tai Chi works, the exercise program, because that's manipulation of energy as well. If you have association with people in pagan circles or Wiccan, they do a lot of energy work, and in particular, a lot of energy healing. They may be willing to show you some of that. It's all around us. It's just a matter of finding the right source that is qualified to teach what we want to teach, or what we want to learn. Does that answer?
It does, but it also prompts me to ask whether you, in fact, ever put classes on in San Antonio that we might come down and attend?
I have not, but I will probably consider putting something like that on the agenda.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to ask a question at this point? We still have quite a bit of time, and I'm concerned that if we hold questions until the end, that we won't have time to address them.
Okay.
So if anyone has a question, if you'd put up your hand, I will call on you. Question from one person is, what are your favorite states to induce in your bottoms? One, when your intention is to dom, and then two, when your intention is to heal, and another question was, and flow.
When I'm working with a submissive and it's in a BDSM setting, my intention is usually to induce subspace. I can do that a little faster if I involve energy play, but it's not critical to do it at that point. And I'll talk a little bit about subspace in a minute. When I'm healing, it's a totally different mode. I go into trance when I'm doing energy healing. And that comes from my shaman training. I'm able to manipulate energy better when I'm in that trance state with that intention.
Let me ask another question then. Knowing that you are, it does, but let me continue. Knowing that you are a hypnotist and therefore used to words like anchors, anchoring, state change, and so forth, do you use anything such as, do you use any anchors when you're, or presets to set the tone and the mood when you're going to be doing energy play?
Not specifically for energy.
Or do you play? Okay.
The only thing I make sure when I'm doing energy work with someone is that they have a similar understanding of chi, of astral body, of energy flow. Once I'm comfortable with their understanding of that and what the impacts can be, then I go ahead with energy play. I don't use any kind of anchor or preconditioning. I do that with hypnosis, but not with energy play. And the two are
okay, then a question from Coates is,
and sometimes in effect.
Yes. Say again, pardon me?
Energy work and hypnosis can look very similar. I mentioned the bondage with gluing a person to the wall. Well, I can do that with hypnosis as easily as I can with energy work.
Okay. And then Coates is asking whether by subspace you mean surrender, which gives you an opening to discuss subspace.
Okay. Which takes me to my next topic. When we talked at the Master Slave Conference, you mentioned energy flow and spirituality. So I wanted to briefly address spirituality, and that takes me into subspace. Okay? There's a quote.
Yes, that sounds fine. Go ahead.
There's a quote that I found on the internet recently, and it goes, "Pain, when pushed and endured long enough, brings to the surface the uninhibited, raw soul of human beings. When two people can experience this together, it is like meeting on another plane." Basically, this is about reaching subspace and the energy exchange that occurs at that time between two individuals. And it can be phenomenal when they connect on that level. I've done that several times with certain submissives who were very in tune with energy play. And I can tell you, it's a trip and a half to fly with them through the energy connection. Now, pain has been used throughout the centuries to achieve religious enlightenment, union with a Godhead, to gain insight into some higher consciousness. This is what most people associate with spirituality and ecstatic experiences. That's not what I'm going to be talking about here. Instead, I'm referring more to the path to self-understanding, self-actualization. This often also involves the use of ecstatic states or blissful states. Traditionally, mystics, saints, holy men achieve these through pain. In BDSM, we achieve subspace through pain, and that is essentially the same blissful or ecstatic state. Subspace to me is that sense of entering into an altered state of consciousness. Flying. You're completely separated from your physical body. Going somewhere else is the way it's also sometimes described. It can be, and usually is, a primary goal in BDSM to get your submissive to that state. Very similar to a tantric tradition, because there's a tendency to elicit sexual energy, but then harness that energy for some other purpose than sexual release. So it's very similar. Much of our equipment these days and practices are very similar to shamanic or tribal initiations. For spiritual BDSM practitioners in particular, the use of sexual energy or pain or rigid bondage, intense servitude, specifically geared towards achievement of that, if you will, psycho-spiritual state beyond ordinary consciousness. And we call that state subspace. To my knowledge, there are no constraints on subspace. What it's like, how it's achieved varies from person to person, and often from scene to scene, even with the same person. The exact nature of the state that people aim for can't be predicted, but it's my belief that your intention and your background when you go into the BDSM scene can influence the nature of the substate, the altered state of consciousness that you experience. If you have a strong religious background and the intention or expectation of arriving, let's say, on the level of angels is the way I've heard it described. When you go into subspace, you may actually experience that. You may feel like you have achieved the level of the angels. You've achieved some level of enlightenment that you were looking for. I say may because subspace is not always predictable. You can shape it in general, but sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes if you're going into a BDSM scene with some expectation that subspace will give you insight into your own self, what drives you, what makes you who you are, you may very well achieve that when you go into subspace rather than some union with a Godhead or achieving the level of the angels. You'll instead see yourself for who you are, what you are, and what motivates you. That is all based on what your background is and what your expectations are. I mentioned earlier, I believe, that it's being, I'm calling the spiritual being on a transcendent path towards self-actualization and understanding. I'm using the term transcendence there as rising above something else rather than changing. If you have an understanding of yourself and you're going into subspace, you're maybe looking to transcend, to get above where you are now so you can look down and get a better understanding of who you are, what drives you. It can be a very enlightening thing. It can also be a very frightening thing for people who are not used to it, because it is definitely an altered state of consciousness. You need to explain in advance, if your purpose is to get them to subspace, what you intend to do, and if they give you a blank look, explain to them what it's all about. That's about all that I wanted to say about spirituality. The current trend of spirituality is to separate it from religion. Spirituality these days is considered more of a secular approach, and I prefer considering it in that vein.
Well, this has been very helpful, and I want to. I'll let you continue. There are a couple of questions that are on the boards. One is, when you have a bottom who needs to get rid of their negative energy in a way that is more critical than in a regular scene, do you change your energy as a top to help them rid this, but not have it reflect on you?
That's a good one. If I'm going to be doing a scene with a bottom and I see that they have a lot of negative energy, they're really in a bad mood, a bad way, I'll try to work with them before the scene starts to get rid of some of that energy. I'll do actual healing session with them, but that's because I'm trained to do it. I'll try my best to get that negativity out of them before we start. The healing that I do with energy, I am imparting positive energy to them, but I don't do that during the session. During the session, I am so connected on an energy level with the person that it's flowing both ways. If I put up a barrier to stop it, I'm breaking that connection. So I try to resolve the thing before we get into the session. Next.
Another question is there a quality of energy that you particularly enjoy in energy bottoms? Who makes a good energy bottom?
Someone who is experienced in energy manipulation, someone who knows how to build and direct positive energy. Those are usually the ones who are the most fun to play with, because when you relate with them, when you connect with them, you get a very deep connection, and you can start doing a lot more with them energy-wise than somebody who is just vaguely familiar with it. One thing you need to be careful of too, and I alluded to people who draw energy, those who have a lot of negative energy. There is such a thing out there as an energy vampire. These are people who will suck the energy out of you in a heartbeat. And it's not necessarily because they're filled with negative energy, but just because they thrive so much on positive energy that they'll draw it out of whoever they can. I've had good friends who've had encounters with energy vampires, and they've experienced physical ailments, mental ailments, all kinds of things because of the association. I've had a couple of run-ins with 2 energy vampires in the past too, so I know what kind of damage they can do to a person. Okay?
On that topic, let me mention, you know, in the world of BDSM, you keep stumbling upon subcultures pretty much as long as doesn't matter how long you've been involved with it. So we have friends who, where the master is a psychic vampire. And he specifically, he's very sophisticated. And he and his slave have a particular interplay that they do where he needs to draw her energy out. And I won't go any more into that than to say that the book on the subject is by Raven Caldera.
Yep.
And it's called The Ethical Psychic Vampire. And I wondered whether you had any other recommendations in readings, because this is, in fact, a minuscule BDSM subculture.
Raven's book is the one I was going to recommend. It's the only one I found that explores it in any detail. Most of my experience has been from talking to people who were Wiccan or who were pagan, who have had encounters or have done work to help people recover from encounters with energy vampires or psychic vampires.
Right. Well, once again, we're just coming up to 9 o'clock, and there are some really heavy hitters in the room tonight. And a number of you I know play with energy. Is there anything that you would like to ask or share? I won't call you out, but I know that you know that I know who you are. Okay, and nobody is going to say anything, which either means I'll leave that alone too. I won't make it mean anything. Did you want to cover anything? I won't do that. See, I'm learning.
Very well.
So, did you wish to? Did you have anything else you would like to cover for the next 10 minutes or so?
No, that about sums up what I wanted to bring up, because I wanted to leave a lot of time for questions.
There was a question that Coates had asked earlier about whether you meant how you used the word subspace and whether that really meant surrender.
I don't see subspace as surrender. One of the ways I used to explain subspace was it's escape. It's not a perfect explanation, but we have a fight or flight response very deeply buried in our primitive minds. When we build pain so high that we want it to stop, and there's no physical way of fighting it, our option is to escape. And in current culture, that's a preferred mode, is escape, flight. If you're in bondage and you're being flogged or whipped or whatever, and that's causing the pain, you can't physically escape. So eventually the mind decides, well, I can't physically escape, maybe I'll mentally escape. And the mind takes off. It goes into subspace. In subspace, it can go to some other space where it's looking down on what's going on. It can go to an out-of-body experience. It can go to all kinds of things. But it's not surrender that I see. It's more a culmination of all of the pain, a culmination of all of what's going on.
Coates is also asking, does escape mean disassociation in your mind?
A lot of times, yes. Disassociation between the mind and the body, quite often.
Okay. Earlier you had mentioned redirecting a person's energy. So let's say that you're in a scene and you're feeling a lot of negative energy. Any tips or techniques that you can suggest about how in the world you actually, as a practical matter, deflect or transform that person's energy?
Nothing that I could sum up in a few sentences or even a paragraph or two. It takes a lot of practice to be able to manage energy on that level.
Okay. And then Nani asks, a lot of energy practices have a concept of ground and center. Yes. Do you find it makes a difference when you have a bottom who is grounded or not grounded?
If I'm going to do energy work, I'll usually work them through grounding and centering before the scene starts.
Okay, well now there's a follow-up from Coates that says, okay, so how do you ground your bottom?
The grounding exercise is, and I do grounding and centering as an essential part. I have them visualize their energy as it has been scattered throughout the day. With all of their changes in focus, all of the things going on, they've directed energy to all kinds of different things around them. I have them visualize those as branches extending out and draw all of those back into their body. Then I have them extend that energy down into the earth so that they are actually connected to the core of the earth and sharing energy. And I have them extend energy up through the crown chakra so that they combine with the universal energy. That's essentially what I do with them for grounding and centering. If
I were to ask then, how do you yourself personally ground? Is it much the same answer? You envision yourself as a tree with roots and you bring your energy into the ground?
Yeah, I don't envision myself as a tree, but I envision the energy flowing that way. Yeah.
Okay. And then Nikita's asking, there are many different ways of describing grounding, all amounting to basically the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Nikita, did you want to say anything about that?
Hi, it's Ursula here.
Hi, Ursula.
Hello. I just wanted to say that the two types that I'm familiar with are yoga and Wicca, because I practice a lot of yoga and, we're both pagans. So yoga has a way of describing grounding, and Wiccan beliefs has a way of describing grounding as well. And I think the best thing to do is to read a lot and find which one speaks to you, which one works for you. That's what I had to do. I had to find what worked for me and what basically just visual I could imagine that I could relate to for my grounding exercises. And I actually
okay, Ursula, do you have any books or resources that you'd particularly recommend?
I have some yoga books. I basically do grounding for yoga when I'm doing my yoga practice, and a lot of the books, a lot of the basic books for yoga will actually describe that. and a lot of the beginner pagan books as well will describe that, because as you're starting a ritual, you need to ground. And so a lot of the basically beginner Wiccan books will have visual exercises for you to do that. But again, it depends on your belief, right? It depends on what you relate to, right? So a little bit of research will go a long way, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. Master Shack, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I agree completely with that. My training in grounding started with the martial arts because we did grounding and centering to start that. And then I went into the shamanism, and those are the techniques that I tend to use more. But it's just personal style. Use what works.
Okay. Okay. We're coming up to the end. It's 5 after 9. If somebody has a question to ask, this is not the time to be shy. And Nani has asked, have you ever tried doing energy work in a scene with an ungrounded bottom?
Not that I'm aware of, or at least can't remember.
What does sadistic energy play look like?
It depends on the skill of the practitioners. If you're really, really skilled at energy work, you can inflict tremendous pain on your submissive once you're connected energy-wise without even touching them or just barely touching them. It's amusing. What can I say? I'm a sadist. It's amusing. You touch them lightly and they scream.
Good, thank you. And perhaps, Coates, you and I could have a private discussion on learning something about this path ourselves, since you're also here in Austin. I'd be very interested in that, and I'd love to be able to get together with you. Okay, I guess I'm going to pull, unless you have anything else to add, Master Shack, I'm going to pull the video back over here.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, here we go. I want to thank you again so much. This was just a fabulous evening. You've done just a lovely, lovely job. It's just exactly what I had hoped for. Thank you so much. It's just such a treat to have you as, in our lives.
Did you tell them that I was here?
Oh, Master is over here. Let me see. I'm not allowed to move the camera over there because
she's working.
She is working, and she's in working garb instead of presentation garb or evening garb. And so Nikita and Ursula say hi to you. And that's it. We'll sign out. And I will say again that in 2 weeks, we're having multi-perv. For those of you that are in Austin who might know multi-perv, he's going to be doing beyond foot rubbing into the area of foot worship. And Master Shack's boy, Sugar Bear, is also going to be on. So we'll have a couple of perspectives on foot worship. And we certainly encourage, we hope that many of you can come back and join us. And once again, thank you all so much for coming. And again, Ava, thank you so much for hosting this. And with that, I will say good night.